Welcome to Asian American Life. I'm your host, Ernabel DeMillo. Today's special edition of Asian American Voting Power looks at the fastest growing population in the country. According to the latest Pew Research, nearly 15 million eligible AAPI voters will cast their vote in the November election. And understanding how diverse of a population we are is of critical importance. We'll look at the key issues impacting our communities and what it means for our future. Asian Americans are a rising force in politics. Dollars and cents, how will the economy affect the election? Immigration system hurts hospital nursing shortage. Shifting tides, more Asian Americans are leaning right. And generational changes, we'll look at the youth voter movement. This and more on Asian American Life.
I'm Kyung Yoon. The 2024 presidential election has seen an unprecedented number of Asian American candidates in the spotlight.
You can't fix the mess if you don't win an election.
Nikki Haley, a daughter of Indian immigrants, made a strong and memorable bid for the Republican presidential nomination before ending her campaign in March, while fellow South Asian Vivek Ramaswamy also caught the nation's attention before bowing out in January. And Vice President Kamala Harris is the first biracial Asian and African American to occupy her post. They follow in the footsteps of trailblazing Asian American presidential candidates who include Congresswoman Patsy Mink in 1972, Bobby Jindal in 2015, Andrew Yang in 2017, and Tulsi Gabbard, who is of Samoan and Southeast Asian descent, in 2020. In New York City and state, a record number of Asian Americans have been breaking through in recent years, getting elected to the New York City Council and the state legislature. One of the newest members of the New York State Assembly is Assemblymember Grace Lee, who was elected in 2022 to represent District 65, covering Chinatown, the Financial District, Battery Park City, and the Lower East Side.
When I started in the State Assembly, it was at the height of anti-Asian hate across New York and across the country. And so starting as one of the few Asian legislators in the state legislature, I knew that I had a responsibility not only to the people who I represented, but also to the broader Asian community in New York, to serve them and to give them a voice.
As the first Korean-American woman elected to New York State government and the co-chair of the Asian Pacific American Task Force, she's been using her voice to lift up Asian American communities, introducing landmark legislation to declare Asian Lunar New Year a public school holiday in New York State, and helping to secure an unprecedented $30 million in the 2023-24 state budget for Asian American community organizations.
This is historic funding. We've never had so much money committed to the Asian community. And I think it is a testament to the representation that we have in the legislature. We have now 12 Asian American legislators within the State Assembly and the State Senate. And we are working very closely together, collaboratively, to make sure that the Asian American community has proper representation.
And considering New York's large and growing Asian American population, Assemblymember Lee says candidates need to pay attention to this important constituency.
What candidates need to be doing is kind of similar to what government needs to be doing. We need to be talking to voters. We need to be speaking to them about the issues that they care about, and we need to be doing it in language. Public safety is definitely high on the list, especially as we've seen, the increase in anti-Asian hate. And then I would say the second is education. They believe in the American dream, and they believe in being able to provide a good education to their kids to help them succeed in the United States and have that opportunity.
And Assemblymember Lee says the fight will continue for increased funding for Asian American communities, especially as our numbers continue to grow in New York State and across the country. I'm Kyung Yoon for Asian American Life.
From inflation to cost of living to economic inequality, the economy is among the top concerns for Asian American voters.
First-time voter, Hunter College student, and CUNY intern Stella has many issues on her mind heading into the 2024 elections.
I'm hearing more and more that I'll never own property, I'll never buy a home, I'll never own a home, that I'll have to rent for the rest of my life. And even then, renting is becoming more and more unaffordable. That's a really big concern of mine, especially as I grow older and I look to, get a job. And I'm also hearing that the job market's not good. So it's looking a little bleak for my generation.
And that economic uncertainty plagues a good portion of Asian American voters, according to recent surveys.
We've done polling at AAJC with API YVote and API data pretty much since 2008. And every single year we do the poll, we see that the economy and jobs are, if not the top, at least the top 3 priorities for Asian Americans.
The most recent surveys of AAPI adults find financial struggles are a growing concern. A 2023 study conducted by AAPI Data and AP NORC revealed that 2/3 of Asian American adults surveyed said their household expenses have increased, while nearly half say their savings have decreased. Another 2023 survey conducted by the Pew Research Center found that 41% of Asian American registered voters surveyed said that inflation was the most important issue facing their community, with economic inequality cited as the second most pressing issue.
Our community wants to make sure that they're able to sustain themselves in what has been sort of like a tumultuous last few years relative to some changes in the economy from the pandemic, the recovery that has disproportionately impacted Asian Americans from different angles when we're thinking about not only Asian American small businesses that suffered during the pandemic, the interruption of the supply chain, to an increase in anti-Asian violence, to folks staying at home, right? Even from that, those effects continue to ripple out.
There's certainly a concern about jobs, there's concern about education, and education means access to job opportunities. And certainly there are a lot of Asian Americans who are small business owners, so they're worried about the cost of labor, the cost of inputs into their businesses, cost of rent.
But capturing the concerns of the AAPI community through polling is a complex issue that's recently come under scrutiny. As a relatively small section of the population, critics argue AAPI voters have been invisible in surveys, falling into the other category where the Asian American community and the diverse subgroups within are not represented.
So when we're talking about Asian American voters, we again are talking about folks that speak multiple different languages, that come from dozens of countries and have different stories. And so when we're talking about Asian American voters, that data disaggregation is really important, right? The experiences of a Nepali immigrant might be very different than those from a Korean American.
The Asian American community is not a monolith, right? There are many different parts of our communities, and which is why we've always advocated for polling firms to be cognizant of that fact and do a better job of polling that community.
And those insights are especially crucial when it comes to concerns over the economy and considering where to devote resources.
12.2% of those living in poverty in New York City are Asian Americans. So again, I think it's really important to dispel the stereotype that Asian Americans are exclusively the ones that have high earning potential. Many of our communities struggle with poverty, struggle living in poverty, and what does access to those resources for our communities look like?
Asian Americans Advancing Justice is currently working on another survey with AAPI Data and API YVote to gauge the concerns of voters like Stella as the 2024 elections loom. For Asian American Life, I'm Susan Junn.
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has declared the shortage of nurses a national crisis. Historically, the U.S. has relied on the gaps with foreign nurses, but anti-immigration rhetoric has changed all that.
A nationwide nursing shortage intensified by the COVID-19 pandemic is now hitting close to home.
More than 3 years since the start of the pandemic, there are still long waiting times at both hospitals and for in-home care.
An estimated 100,000 registered nurses left the workforce during the past 2 years, citing stress, burnout, and retirements. According to the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, 600,000 more are expected to leave by 2027. Historically, the U.S. has recruited foreign nurses to help fill the gap, but that pipeline has reached its limits.
To bring in a bedside nurse or standard RN into the country is very difficult. It can take several years to complete, and there are obviously thousands of Americans in need of health care at hospitals.
Rio Guerrero, an immigration lawyer, explained the complicated process to immigrate legally to America. Despite the need for medical health professionals, nurses in countries like the Philippines, China, and India have to wait years for their visa appointments.
So when you apply for a visa, such as nurses who are applying for these EB3 immigrant visas, there's only a certain number of visas allotted for the entire world to come each year on these visas. And there is a per country limit for each one of these visas. Some countries tend to apply for more visas than others, including India, the Philippines, China. And so the wait really occurs because the visa isn't available. There are too many applicants.
One solution is to raise the caps. In 2023, Illinois Senator Richard Durbin introduced a bill that would raise the visa allotments for nurses and physicians, but the bill stalled. Guerrero says illegal immigration, a hot-button political topic, has made much-needed bills like this one hard to pass.
It's very difficult to get through all of the noise about the border. Everyone today talks about the border and what we call unlawful immigration, or what is deemed unlawful immigration. But the need for legal immigration in particular sectors of our country, such as healthcare, is necessary and not being served properly by the law.
In the meantime, schools in New York are stepping up, working to fill the gap by expanding their nursing programs. Estee Lauder heir Leonard Lauder donated a record $52 million to Hunter College's nursing program. And Lehman College in the Bronx recently opened the doors to a new 52,000 square foot, $95 million nursing training center. Dean Elgloria Harrison gave us an inside look at the state-of-the-art facilities, which includes 22 robotic patient simulators. The school looks just like a real hospital, from the maternity ward to the ICU.
All of the rooms in ICU are equipped with monitors, and so their heart rates and their respiratory rates and their blood pressures, all of those things would actually be monitored, and students would actually understand what it was like when they are in an ICU setting.
The idea behind simulators is to ease students from the classroom to the workplace, a workplace ready to hire.
We have an acute shortage all over New York City and New York State of health professionals that look like most of the New Yorkers that we are and understand our communities.
New York is expected to have a shortage of nearly 40,000 nurses by 2030. Underrepresented communities like the Bronx will be particularly hard hit. CUNY produces nearly half of New York's new nurses annually. 70% of the graduates come from historically underserved groups. Ruqayya Moore, who immigrated to the U.S. from Bangladesh, looks forward to giving back. She decided to pursue a career in health after nurses advocated for her when her twin babies were born prematurely.
The nurse advocate for me and the nurse advocate for my kids. So the whole that story really inspired me. Okay, one day I will get back these two things to other families who need me. Like I need the nurses. So from that point, I chose that, okay, I will be the nurse and I will be the pediatric nurse.
While programs like Lehman's will certainly help fill the need for nurses,
experts say it's still not enough. According to one study, the U.S. will need to hire 2.3 million new healthcare workers by 2025 in order to care for its aging population.
The best way to solve this really is not just to educate those here in the United States to become nurses, but also to bring over the talent from overseas. And this is what this country has done for years in other industries, and they should be doing it now for healthcare workers.
For Asian American Life, I'm Ernabelle DeMillo.
I'm Vivian Lee. For decades, the AAPI community has been a reliable voting bloc for the Democratic Party. In recent years, that's begun to shift. It's most noticeable in the largest sub-ethnic group of Chinese American voters, leaning right, Republican, even in a Democratic stronghold like New York City. Why?
It's a shift towards balance. That's it. It's a shift towards the middle. If you were to ask me that same question about a decade ago, I would say, no, everybody's still a Democrat.
Jenda Wu is a lawyer and former NYPD pilot who says he used to be one of them. From high school through law school, liberal, Democrat. Now, in his 50s, he's voting for the presumed Republican candidate Donald Trump in November. He wants Trump back in the White House with his America First platform that includes energy independence and border security.
You're voting for a CEO. You're not voting for your neighbor. You're not looking for a good friend. You're just trying to look for competence. Yeah, he's egomaniacal, but that is his strength. Let's be more sensible with the border, right? As an immigrant, my parents and other immigrants that I've known, we waited in line, sometimes for more than 10 years.
Wu says he's never declared a party affiliation in a city where 4 of the 5 boroughs are true blue Democratic. About 40% of Chinese American voters in NYC are registered as independent, and independent voters tend to vote conservative. Professor John Mollenkoff of CUNY's Center for Urban Research at the Graduate Center studied election results from 2 gubernatorial races, 2018, when Democrat Andrew Cuomo was elected, and 2022, when Democrat Kathy Hochul won. Districts with sizable Chinese American communities in Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island that were blue just a few years ago turned red, in some corners deeply red, to favor Hochul's Republican challenger Lee Zeldin. That kind of defection will matter in tight races like the Hochul-Zeldin matchup.
Between 2018 and 2022, they shifted quite markedly towards the Republican candidates in those 2 gubernatorial elections. And there are many reasons for that, but among all the different racial ethnic groups in New York City, their shift towards the conservative side or the Republican side was the sharpest.
Annie Wang studied the same data to find out more about Chinese American electoral engagement over time in the city. She found that the number of registered Chinese American voters in New York City had doubled since 2001. So did its share of the general electorate, from 2.5% to 5%. That's roughly 250,000 registered Chinese American voters in the Big Apple. Their turnout spiked to 32% during the mayoral primary when Andrew Yang was won in a crowded field of Democratic candidates. It dropped to a comparatively low 17% in the general election.
A variety of factors have occurred over the past 5 years that would motivate a Chinese person to vote. One being the rise of COVID, anti-Chinese sentiment leading to anti-Asian crime and hate, the growing fluency on platforms like WeChat and the internet. There was also the reforming of high school admissions tests, which a lot of Chinese families were pretty staunchly against. There's also the increase of migrant shelters in communities and building of jails, specifically in Chinatowns, that they feel unfairly targeted for.
A majority of AAPI voters, 2/3, still vote or lean Democratic across the country. A Pew Research survey of the 5 largest AAPI subgroups last year found a majority of Chinese, Filipino, Indian, and Korean Americans vote or lean Democratic. Vietnamese Americans vote or lean Republican by 51%. But recent contests show the Democratic advantage can be challenged. Republican Congresswomen Young Kim and Michelle Steele, both Korean Americans, flipped their Southern California districts from blue to red in 2020. Both were re-elected in the 2022 midterms. Going back further, more AAPI voters voted for Republican Bob Dole than for Democrat Bill Clinton in 1996. Meanwhile, the AAPI segment of the population is the fastest growing, with the highest number of new eligible voters who are not white this year, numbering 15 million. That's a 15% increase from 2020.
If I were a Republican strategist, I would be focusing on developing support in all the Asian American groups. I mean, there's a lot of small business people, relatively conservative values on a lot of social issues.
I'm most curious to see what that outreach looks like. I think it's not something I've seen done that successfully before. It requires younger generations of Chinese Americans and Asian Americans to translate, to reach out, to communicate, but unless those voters are activated and feel willing to engage, I think it's a very difficult ask.
For Asian American Life, I'm Vivian Lee.
The upcoming 2024 presidential election between two octogenarian presidents is one for the ages. A recent poll found that there is a potential voting force often overlooked by presidential campaigns. The 41 million Gen Z voters, and nearly half are people of color.
The top three issues for me in the 2024 presidential election are immigration, justice, education, and abortion rights.
The issues that matter most to me for this election are mental health, education, and immigration justice.
The most important issue for me this election year is abortion access.
During the most impressionable time in their lives, these digital natives have lived through a global pandemic, racial reckoning, and a looming climate crisis, just to name a few traumatic events. This November, there will be more than 41 million potential Gen Z voters. Nearly half are people of color. These youth are members of YVote, an organization promoting civic engagement and cross-partisan voting. According to a recent poll from Tufts University, 57% of youth say they're extremely likely to cast their ballot in 2024. Among Asian American youth, 68% say they are likely to vote.
Asian American youth vote is really major in a lot of areas. I think because traditionally Asian American youth have trended more towards a Democratic candidate. Young people and Asian Americans youth are not different in this. They're often really interested in voting for different issues, but they find themselves less tied to a specific candidate.
Peter de Guzman is a researcher at Tufts University's Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, better known for its acronym, the Circle.
So we saw that for cost of living, 6 in 10 Asian American youth voted this issue as one of their top 3 priorities, and that was higher than other groups of young people.
The Circle's 2024 youth poll surveyed more than 2,000 U.S. citizens ages 18 to 34, broken down by race, including Asian Americans.
It's really a population that is coming out in support of issues that they want to see addressed, such as cost of living, jobs that pay a living wage, and climate change, in addition to other issues.
I am excited to vote for the first time.
High school senior Ananna is a youth facilitator with YVote. She and her YVote peer Shreya Thakur are undecided voters, and among the 8 million youth who will reach voting age this year.
I think a lot of young people can relate when we say that our options aren't looking the best right now.
Depending on who I choose, either Republican, Democrat, or any other party, they could politically, economically, literally in any way influence how my future can be.
Youth voter turnout for presidential elections increased by 11 points, from 39% in 2016 to 50% in 2020. Turnout for the 2024 election could be determined by mental health issues reported by youth. Almost half of young people report feelings of isolation and lack of confidence.
That among young people that are struggling with mental well-being, they're less likely to indicate that they're going to vote. And so youth mental health has been a major narrative in kind of research and support around young people, and it's something to really track going forward.
Other factors for youth voter turnout comes down to engagement with civic organizations like YVote and Next Generation Politics, and most importantly, outreach from the presidential campaigns, or lack thereof.
We saw that less than 1 in 5 young people in our poll said that they had been contacted by a candidate or campaign leading up to the 2024 election. So there definitely is a major gap in outreach.
There is a silver lining. 2/3 of young people agree that they have the power to change this country.
I have more trust in young people in making collective action and impact more than the presidents who are supposed to, protect us or represent us.
For Asian American Life, I'm Rainer Ramirez.
That's our show for now. If you want to learn more about these stories, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Asian American Life. And please be sure to register to vote, because your vote counts. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo. Thanks for watching.